We want people that have big plans, like the next Nicholas Zenström who wants to build a Skype, who, came from Uppsala, and Klarna's founders, similar. So we have a lot of these historic cases of founders like that actually produce like not just big companies, but phenomenally big, unicorns in European global standards. But one of the problems Uppsala has is we lose some of that talent. So that's probably an objective for us too, is to provide a hub that's fun, creative, feels like a place that entrepreneurs want to come and spend their time.
Jason, welcome to the inaugural podcast. So you've now reached the pinnacle of your career.
It's all downhill from here.
This is it. Enjoy it. Enjoy the 30 minutes. We're here. Well, I'm here today because of Base 10. Something you've created over the last few years. Super interesting. I thought that's like the best place to start, right? Yeah. How that came about.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me. And yes, I mean, the history of Base 10 really was I'm a tech entrepreneur by background. So sort of arrived in Sweden 10 years ago and kind of had an itch I wanted to scratch myself. I landed in Uppsala, which is the fourth biggest city here in Sweden. So, there wasn't really a huge amount of things that were run by entrepreneurs actually in the city. The history of the city has been a very strong academic city. So the universities played a big part in producing a lot of the talent. But I felt like there wasn't really this kind of, vibe from the private sector, from entrepreneurs themselves building things like co-working hubs and events. And so it was really kind of something I was running a startup at the time. I just felt like originally it came through actually a conference that I started, an event, and that grew, became more and more successful. And then there was a need for physical space. So that was kind of I was the original customer, if you like, of Base 10. So I just hypothesized that maybe there's some other people like me out there that need this.
And then you've got some money together. We're able to, what was the process then? Like, was it the money first or finding the space, or how did it come?
Yeah, it was sort of a bit of both. We did a pilot of Base 10. So the co-working hub itself, it's about 4 or 5 years old now. We've been here in this building for about a year, which is a much newer, brand new building. So we ran like a pilot for a few years and we got some funding from the city. So like public sector financing. And they put an upphandling out, which in English is a procurement. So we basically bid and won this procurement, and then we were able to use that funding to then build this it was like a 5-year project. So,
okay.
Yeah.
And how far in are we
We're
now?
About a year into it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
a couple of years actually. Yeah.
And then with the goal, like you've obviously got some things you want to achieve with it, right? And like, so from conception, through to where we are now, through to what you want to do in the future, like what are some of the things that you wanted to achieve?
Yeah. I mean, there's a few guys I think are quite high up there. Is essentially to kind of encourage other entrepreneurs to come and start their companies, to help them, support them to grow. We're a startup hub, so we're very focused on, the type of people that are coming in. We're not just kind of renting to anybody. It's more specifically focused around startups. So we want people that have big plans, like the next Nicholas Zenström who wants to build a Skype, who, came from Uppsala, and Klarna's founders, similar. So we have a lot of these historic cases of founders like that actually produce like not just big companies, but phenomenally big, unicorns in European global standards. But one of the problems Uppsala has is we lose some of that talent. So that's probably an objective for us too, is to provide a hub that's fun, creative, feels like a place that entrepreneurs want to come and spend their time. And by doing that, it's sort of secret kind of objective is keeping them maybe slightly longer in Uppsala to grow their company slightly longer. So there's a few objectives there. But yeah, those are probably some big ones.
Yeah, and that kind of ecosystem concept's really important, right? And I mean, right. What are some of the things you do around fostering that? So I think that's one bit, and then also like obviously, what I do and what I talk about is a lot about the buildings, and so I'd be interested again to see how the technology or the building fits into your goals.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the building in itself, I mean, that was a very strategic decision to be here in Juvelen, which is in English the jewel. I mean, it's basically the crown jewel of the Uppsala landscape right now. It's one of the newest buildings in town. It's pretty premium building, I would say, architecturally amazing. So you don't often find a lot of hubs in those spaces in startup. There's kind of different flavors. Was we decided that Uppsala, it needs to kind of put itself out there as a brand to say, like, first of all, this is something impressive when people come and visit. But also for the companies, because if you're attracting talent, why would a talented person come to Uppsala and work here instead of, say, Stockholm or other cities, or actually in Sweden generally? So I think having the impressive nature of the building and the architecture has helped, especially when companies are growing, because one of the wow factors is actually coming and working here at Base 10, so they can use that as part of their recruitment angle. So that's been worth it for us. Of course, to do that, it's more cost, and so you have to find that cost. So hence why we're public sector funded. One of the reasons, is that it's very difficult to do that if you're kind of going for the let's have cheap, affordable rent to startups so they can start and be in the best building in town. The two don't really often go hand in hand. So we wanted to do both. So therefore, we had to speak to the city and look at public sector financing. That's one of the ways I'd say it's been helpful in terms of the building itself.
Yeah, right. And then with this like ecosystem, you mentioned the event you used to do, or you still do, right? I guess that's an important part of what you're trying to create here.
So the event?
The event, yeah. It's Upstart.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right, yes, exactly. Yeah.
So that's like about as well putting, the money with the company, or just letting the company be able to tell their story and whatever it is. But I mean, and as you said, like this is the kind of extension of that. Just more on a permanent thing, like the event just goes on.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Upstart was sort of a good way to spike attention in a very short space of time. Like how I looked at it, I actually kind of wanted to do both from the start. It was co-working hub and a conference was kind of both on my kind of radar, but the event made sense because that brings the community together. And you can create a lot of buzz and get a lot of it. But essentially, after the event, it's over. At least my event was yearly, and now it's yearly. So it's sort of like really cool. And then after that, what happens then? So that was a natural progression into a space. And actually, Base 10 has its own event space. So we started doing more like smaller but more regular events. And we have like partners in house. That was another strategic move to get a couple of partners that run their own events and help startups themselves. So we have Driv Huset is one of them. They're like a national organisation that helps counsel startups, and Connect Uppsala is another one that helps actually to startups to find investors. So they sit upstairs and actually, essentially tenants or members of ours. So that helps a lot too, because they have their own initiatives. Upstart I see as more kind of a big noisy thing that's sort of a one-off every year, and then Base 10 is kind of the slow grind all year through.
And what do the startups say to you when they give you feedback? Like, what is it that they appreciate most from this?
Yeah, probably the community and the opportunities from that community. I mean, it's being around other like-minded entrepreneurs and people in the ecosystem. It's probably the number one thing. It's essentially being kind of one door away or one sort of bench away or seat away from someone who's going through the same problems as you. And that's we've seen so many cases now of startups hiring people from within the centre. So it is that kind of community ecosystem, investors, you kind of get in contact with. We're all doing the same thing essentially. So that's probably the biggest thing. And that's played quite a big impact on the way we've designed the space as well. I mean, like, for example, the coffee machine is on the second floor. We have 3 floors here. We don't put a coffee machine on the third floor or really the first floor for that reason, that it's like a magnet. It pulls people into one place. So we had to think about, we actually originally wanted a 1-floor setup, and we ended up with 3. So we had to kind of design ways to pull people, a bit like a shop would. If you're going through the section with your kids and you see all the sweets, and it's like you do it kind of without thinking. So actually, even though quite a few of the tenants might say to us, "Oh, we really want a coffee machine on the 3rd floor," we'll probably never do it, because we know that the pro outweighs the con there, and that people will actually get in the lift and come down and they bump into people. And it creates these conversations. So there's a lot of thought into the psychology of space. I think co-working centres, should put a lot of energy into. It's a really big part of what makes a community, I think, physically. So,
and are you making those kind of decisions based on your gut feeling, or is there data around that? Like, how are you?
It's a good question. I mean, there probably should be more data. Like all things, it's generally quite difficult and costly to get that kind of data. I mean, it's a little bit of both gut feeling plus anecdotal, perhaps, from the feedback we get from members. Luckily, we had a test sort of pilot. So our old building was a demolition project. So we had that for a few years. We were able to test a bunch of stuff and see, what works and what doesn't. And, you hear quite quickly because you get complaints if something's not working and people say this is great, so we've been able to kind of use that as a pilot and then take all the good things to this new space and get rid of all the bad things that didn't work as well.
So that's the kind of collaboration piece as well. I mean, anything else they tell you? I mean, in terms of the amenities as well, there's things that they're like, this is absolutely what we want.
Yeah, absolutely.
And things that are like, well, yeah, okay, that's great, but we can live without it.
Yeah, I mean, we're quite good in that sense. We've been quite organised from the start because we have this thing we call the Base 10 Improvements Board. So basically you fill in a form, essentially, and whenever someone comes to me or sends me a Slack message or an email, generally they get pushed through that channel, and then it basically creates a ticket in a Trello board. So we have it's public, so all of Base 10 can see that. So whenever we kind of make a thing of making the things that aren't good as well, like more public, because we don't want to kind of hide and say, look, there's nothing wrong with Base 10. Of course there's going to be tons, we're still learning ourselves, so we kind of make that public, and then we get votes and things. Other people come in and put their input on. Sometimes you get conflicting, like someone will say, hey, we want to have privacy vinyls on the windows because it feels like we need more privacy and it's a very glass building. Whereas another would say, actually, I kind of like that, it gets me an idea of kind of movement and I feel a bit less isolated. And so it's good to gather enough feedback before we kind of hop onto a decision. But if it's obviously a thing we can do and the cost makes sense and stuff, then we'll generally action it. So yeah, there's a whole, right now I think we've got maybe 20, 30 tasks in that board going through right now. Everything from we want better food at lunchtime, so we've just implemented a new vending machine there, sort of trust shop, and then right through to the printer to bigger things as well. So yeah,
that's really interesting about the openness. I haven't seen that with any other co-working spaces.
Yeah,
like you said, like no one expects anything to be perfect, do they? And but at least you can think, well, like we're iterating here, right? As you would in any business. Like
exactly.
What is, what's working, what isn't, and at least seeing some progress there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the kind of public product roadmap. I suppose that comes from my tech, days, because you see that a lot in like San Franciscan startups. It's very common. Like even Trello, I believe, sort of pioneered this in their own Trello, project management system. They had a public board, and I always used to think that's kind of cool because you see actually where it's going. Often you write to support, and that's it, and you don't hear back for months. And whereas you see there's a ticket, and you see where it is in the queue, and you see the comments on it, and other people commenting. So it makes it feel a bit more like, okay, there's someone's actually handling this. Whereas the more legacy landlords and stuff, they'll have these more old-fashioned ticket systems, and they'll just go into the ether. And if you're lucky, you'll hear back. Otherwise you have to keep hassling them. So
yeah, we all know what that's like.
Yeah, it's not a good experience. As we want to say, and we're quite open that look, we're limited on resources. We tell that often to the startups, so they also have to kind of respect that too. So by having like visibility on it, it's not just us saying it. You can actually see, okay, there's 50 things on this list that are just way more high priority than maybe sort of like getting a second stapler upstairs. Or so it's a good way for us also to kind of manage and be honest, I suppose. Honesty is the best policy, really. So yeah.
Ping pong table.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, ping pong is really good. We actually even a step further. We have a Slack channel, hashtag ping pong. So you can basically post in the channel if you're in the building and you want to have a sort of date with a ping pong person, you can go down and play ping pong. Okay. So that's, another really good kind of magnet-like, facility that really pulls people together. We even thought we at one point had some tech involved. So it was like a camera that was taking motion shots of if someone was playing ping pong, it would post in a Slack channel. So people would then see, oh, there's someone playing ping pong, and someone else would then go down and say, oh, can we hang out and play ping pong? And so it was a bit less, because to actually ask the question, would someone like to play ping pong with me? Especially in Sweden, it's quite a difficult question to throw out, because it's kind of like saying, hey, I've got no friends, will someone be my friend? But if you see a picture of people playing, you can head down there. And so actually these kind of subtle social cues, I think, are really important in a co-working space to create serendipitous moments, I suppose, to create contacts rather than forcing it, which especially in Sweden I found is quite tough.
I think that's interesting what you were saying, like you personally, like you're the driver behind this, right? And it's clear as well, like I know how much you love technology, and you were talking about that. So get the sense like you're prepared to try things anyway, right? You especially with tech. I mean, you were saying earlier about, robots, right? And okay, that's kind of, people have an idea, a perception of how useful that is. But actually, some of the things you were talking about, I thought were genuinely interesting. Like,
like we had a robot at the old base 10. We had a little bit for here, and we were thinking of getting some more. They're basically big telepresence robots. So you can essentially use an app, and it's kind of like a Skype call on wheels. You could explain it as. It's not that complicated technology actually, but you can move this robot via an app yourself from anywhere in the world.
So is that thing it's like a big stick, and then you have the two wheels. I think they have one on that sitcom in America.
Right, yeah, I think they did.
Modern Family.
Yeah, I think there's a few. Yeah, exactly. I think maybe it was the same company. Ours was called a Beam. There's one called Double Robotics as well. The price has come down a lot in this. For couple of $1,000s, you can buy one of these things now. It used to be kind of reserved for the elite, maybe $20,000, $30,000+, but they're a lot cheaper. Yeah, they're kind of like iPads on wheels now. So actually, when we got it, we thought, this will be more of a PR stunt actually, because we had a lot of tech companies. We have a lot of tech companies at Base 10. We're not just for tech anymore. We used to be, and our audience is very tech. So we thought that, but actually it turned out pretty practical. Like I could log in and actually kind of intercept the coffee maintenance guy coming in and say hello.
And his face.
Yeah, it was incredible. But the funny thing was, because it's something about the size of the product, because it looks the size of a human, and because it moves itself, instantly people just get used to it. It's an initial shock of, oh, this is a robot talking to me. This is weird. But then you start talking and you just kick into normal human mode because you're like, someone's talking to you. So you're like, answer. And then it actually found, unlike say handing someone an app or an iPad, it's very unintuitive. People kind of know how to talk to it because it's just like a robot, and the fact it can move itself around has advantages as well. So, I mean, a lot of companies using them for meeting spaces now, especially in COVID times. I mean, I think both companies are booming now. Because, you don't need to catch a flight. You can just have a robot walking around. And so, yeah, we're quite big on especially fun, quirky technology and new technology. I mean, it goes hand in hand with the whole entrepreneur startup vibe. It's inspiring. We've had people start companies off the back of ideas they saw around Base 10. Like one guy started a company because he saw how we were sorting all the mail and was like, there must be a better way. So started building like an IoT mailbox solution to contact people when they had mail. And so, I mean, this is what we want really, is members kind of contributing, and it's an ideas pot essentially. So, yeah.
And you get like, what kind of companies are coming out? There's some you think are a good bet now, and like, how many are there? I don't even know. Yeah, we have. It depends how you measure. We have a few sort of 100 in terms of active members. There's over 1,000 in our Slack channel. But I mean, upstairs we have 24 companies in rooms, and then we have these hot desk spaces. So 24, probably a bit more like on sort of takeoff mode. Okay. Yeah, and we've seen a few cases now where startups have started. A few people. They've gone up office size. So generally started with like a one-person office room, and then or even a hot desk. Moved up to a few, and then. We've got to say our biggest one upstairs is 64 square meters. So it's maybe, you could say sort of 6, 7, 8 sort of plus people. Depends how much you want to cram people in, which startups do, by the way. It's like a battery farm. Sometimes you go into one person room and there's like 5 people in there. But and then eventually they leave. And that's kind of our goal for around about a year for them to fly the nest and get bigger. And many have done that now as well. And around in Uppsala, renting bigger space, which is cool because, I mean, they're creating more jobs and growing. So that's the goal really. So yeah, absolutely. And it looks great for the city as well, and that's why they invested in it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's also why, by the way, taking public sector money, that's quite a big decision to make because you have to change the way the business. I mean, you're not just looking at will this startup pay the rent? Because there's many companies that offer sort of contours hotel, office hotel type setups. And they're a little bit sort of glorified kind of landlords really, whereas we're a bit more focused on who's the company and are they going to be successful. So to do that, someone has to pay that price. And that's really, in our view, it should be the taxpayer because that's essentially where it's all going back into. So it's not to say that's the only way to build co-working, but that's what the path we went down. So we're relatively picky on the private room companies for that reason. Yeah, and no, you're right. Of course, this is just one model. And actually, in the work we do, I've had companies come to me who are looking to set up an incubator within, so of course at larger companies, innovation now is such a buzzword, startups is a buzz thing as well. They're thinking, okay, well, how can we mitigate perhaps some of the potential, companies that we're going to be competing with in the future? Let's get them in, let's invest in these ideas.
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give to like companies that want to do that? Like what works, what doesn't?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We've seen many companies do this more and more now, and sort of started with IBM with their garage.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like, it's a dangerous one to get right. I think some companies get it right and some end up kind of building these, dare I say, slightly lame corporate versions of what sort of good co-working is. And they like to think internally because it looks fancy to have this innovation thing, but no one will be seen dead there. So I think it's actually getting the kind of culture and brand right. That's quite important. Depending on how stuffy a company you are to start with, if you're a big industrial kind of old-fashioned company and suddenly you want to start a co-working hub, you've got a lot of work to do there, perhaps the branding. So I think that's why often also you can compare this to cities. I mean, we've seen this all over the world where cities will go in and create co-working spaces. Even in Uppsala, that's happened. It's never been that successful. I think because of the people running those things are generally sort of government types and tend to be quite bureaucratic. And, I've been to some of these spaces and you get told off because of this, or you go to a meeting room and it's very kind of rule driven. And so that's where we think about that quite a lot at Base 10. We try and even literally there was a sign up for earlier and I sort of took it down. And we basically kind of trying to avoid the sign culture thing as well. I could put so many signs up around Base 10, the things people do in co-working hubs, the kitchens especially, but we're very conscious not to become that hub where we're sort of telling people all the time, because it's a creative space. Whereas if you're a corporate, you tend to fall a bit more into the trap of doing everything sort of the super correct corporate way. And so I think, I don't know what it is really. It's a good question. But I suppose thinking about the brand and the community and, to be honest, making it cool is quite an important value, and it's a very soft, fluffy value.
Well, yeah, it's hard in itself anyway.
It's hard to define it, what makes something cool. And so maybe you survey people or, whatever. But I mean, that's the one thing people always laugh when I tell this to city people. They're just like, yeah. But it's like, no, seriously, it has to be cool. Like if it's not cool, people aren't going to show up. And if you want the next, Mark Zuckerberg or, Steve Jobs, like where do you think they were hanging out when they were starting their things? They were cool places, so it's got, and also Shoreditch in London, we're both from the UK, so we know this kind of infrastructure. It was all kind of cool cafes and hipster places. And so I think you kind of got to think like that as well, that people ultimately startup entrepreneurs, they want to be in fun, creative places. So trying not to dampen that too much with a lot of corporate bureaucracy is a good starting point. Perhaps bringing in entrepreneurs actually that have been there and done it, and to run a centre like that. I mean, if you're looking at Stockholm, SUP 46, you've got Epicenter, they've all had success.
Are they run by?
All companies, yeah. So all ABs run by entrepreneurs.
No, they were entrepreneurs themselves.
Yeah, I think so. At least sort of, partly. I mean, they're very entrepreneurial people running them. So yeah, you can really feel that in the centre and set up sort of structurally as ABs. So it wasn't kind of like city initiatives and there have been some of those too. No one's ever heard of them. So, so there's your answer. I mean, I think even London did this with, it was called, I think, what was it called? City, was it Tech City? I think it was called.
That was in Shoreditch, wasn't it? The old street.
That's it, yeah. This
roundabout.
Big, spent a lot of money.
There.
It was classic government, Basically, it was kind of piggybacking on what was already working in Shoreditch. All the cool hipster cafes became this silicon roundabout, they called it. And then, essentially the government comes in, spends a whole load of money. I was there at the time. The feedback that I got from other people was it's way too expensive. Only the big companies go there because it's far too expensive. So you can kind of lose the original goal in some of this when you do it. So there's some ideas there. But it's a hard one to get right, but I don't know if anyone's got the exact playbook yet. I mean, Google have done this quite well with their Google campuses across the world.
They had one in London. Yeah, I've been there a few times. That was quite good.
I thought was good. Yeah. I think a lot of people were skeptical because it was Google. There was a lot of skepticism around, well, what's the agenda? And I was there a lot. It felt like there was no real agenda. It was just great service. And of course, there's always an agenda really to get to know companies, but it was a soft, push. And that was, so I think they had quite a good example of it. So it's,
And in the space in Base 10, you've got quite a lot of tech here in terms of the building tech, right? So CCTV, the access control system, room booking.
That's
what else am I missing? Obviously, all the heating, HVAC. But
yeah,
I mean, because
exactly.
in a way, you wear like 10 different hats, don't you? You're like the facilities manager, the office manager, the brains behind it, the whole thing. But I mean, what really adds value for you to do your business? Like, is there anything that really stands out? You're like, oh, I can't get by without this.
I mean, definitely the camera systems have been essential. I think that's quite high up there. We learned that in the previous building. We had some cameras we installed, and it was just so valuable. It was just primary thing was make sure we've got cameras and access for security, but other reasons too. I mean, there's different sides to it. The security's been invaluable. The few times we've had to use the security footage for, it can be simple things like someone's lost something, and it's like, well, we can track back and see where was it there at this time. But it also with like other sort of trespassing, and we've had a couple of issues in the past. So when we don't use it often, but when we need it, it's really important. But then also from a more practical point of view, like on the door, we've got Ring as Amazon like system.
Yeah, so you have basically two video systems, right?
Yeah.
Like the more professional one and then the Ring one.
Yeah, exactly.
Did you do that? You installed that yourself?
I got someone to actually mount it because it was electrical stuff. They had to actually put the cable in, but it was essentially, I bought it and it was essentially a quick, easy job to fix. Yeah. We have to. That's a good question. I think in hindsight, I probably would only go with the cheaper, more sort of homemade solution because they've become so good. So frankly, since we've been running Base 10, the cameras are now 4K, night vision, so the actual quality of the products have gone so high. Plus the service has got a lot better. The app's got better. So, I mean, it's just, I would say probably if I could do it again from scratch, I would have just all cloud-based, some kind of Amazon-esque system like a Ring or similar. Because, I mean, we've got the legacy systems now. And first of all, the problem with storage, you've got to store those videos. So we have a server, like we have to actually rent a server for that. And it's only 3 days worth of content, which is another problem. So, because it fills up the hard disk.
Sure,
So there's all sorts. And also the usability is awful because they're all old legacy systems. So I do actually have an app. It took me forever to get this thing set up with a company doing it, but unlike Amazon where you just literally download the app and it works, but yet you go through and I have to literally watch there's no motion tracking in it, and with Amazon all that stuff's baked in, so it's so easy to scroll through, and so we've used that a lot. I mean, just check in on stuff, and also we use the Ring. Ring has added benefits like alerting members when people are at the front door.
Right. So do you integrate it with like Slack and stuff like that? Do you?
Yeah, we have a custom iPad. We actually have a custom piece of software that got made for us by a company in Stockholm called Ventures. So they basically were building this solution. So we were like, hey, you could build it for us. So we were kind of guinea pigs and worked pretty good. It's called Meet Me, and so basically you check in and it sends you a Slack message and a text message, or I think it's Slack text and email we can choose. So we have that as a kind of check-in. But the Ring, if you're a member, you have access to the app. So you can basically, if you're upstairs on the third floor, you can see someone came to reception and you can put your motion tracking on, and you could get like a ping on your Apple Watch right now. Ping, it's like someone's at the door, and you could look at the live view and actually even speak to them and say, hey, I'm just coming on my way down, make yourself at home. And so it's like, that's the idea behind that. And they're all just like home sort of made solutions really, like that aren't really, I mean, I suppose it's the Ring Pro, but they're still very consumer level. I think that's where things are shifting. They're getting so good now and so cheap that it's sort of, why not really?
And then you mentioned about the access as well. The fact, obviously, you're a tenant in a larger building. Mm-hmm. So, like you were saying, one of the key things, right? You didn't want to have like 3 or 4 different cards, right? Just to get into the building. So you have one access system for the outside and one to get in here. So like, was that just an annoyance, or I mean, how did you solve that?
It was quite, it's always been, we've done this twice now with both landlords, the old test sort of pilot and this place, and it's both been very complicated. It's a very simple thing actually, but in practice it's very complicated. You have to go through so many different people, and it's often kind of a bit off the script when you say, hey, I want to program in all these numbers, and of course any given card system may not be compatible with another card system. You have like MyFair, and there's a whole bunch of different technologies powering that, so we had to think think really carefully about what was the one on the front door, because whatever it is, it has to match the one on the inside doors. Otherwise, we'll end up with 2 cards. And so my main goal was just one card does everything. And as a co-working hub, you want just ideally kind of no cards. That's the utopia, really, to kind of have. I know Norrskärn in Stockholm, they're using Kissy as a kind of mobile solution. You can just hold your phone up and you've got these NFC things now. We can use your biochip to open the door. And so we went a little bit more old school, but it's just one card. So essentially that was really key, because it's just we found the hard way managing keys just not possible in co-working. Or you need a full-time person for it, and someone moves out and then you have to get the keys cut, and it's very complicated. So keyless is important. We went with a solution with a sort of beep, I think it's RFID if I'm not mistaken, on MyFair solution on the front door. It's an RCO unit, and then we have on the upstairs like a PIN number, basically people put into their rooms to get in. So just kind of planning that whole process to make sure it was smooth and could be managed well when companies are coming and going a lot as well. So there's often you need to change the codes. And so, in an ideal world, I would have paid more and had a completely cloud-based solution. That would be my dream come true. I've wake up at night dreaming of a cloud-based, entry system one day. But it was, we got quotes. It was hundreds and hundreds of thousands of crowns more than we were willing to pay. So we ended up compromising on cost, but it was quite good. And I think it ticked the boxes. So, yeah.
And I mean, what about in the future, even now? Have you got projects that you're working on, you're thinking, actually, we can improve this, or this will bring a better experience to the tenants? And I mean, again, is they something that they're really asking you for, in terms of tech?
Yeah. In terms of technology, let's think. Yeah, probably meeting spaces are always good. We're quite lucky because we have enough spaces right now, and due to COVID and everything, it's been a bit less volume, so that's not an issue right now. But access to these little pods are quite popular, these kind of Memoori and these kind of solutions. They're a little bit expensive, but I think it's worth it to have these little meeting spaces. Otherwise, tech-wise, I think people are generally happy. We're looking at doing a bit more programs now to looking how we support entrepreneurs coming in. So we'd like to actually have a batch of people come into Base 10 and support them, actually handhold them a bit more. Traditionally, we've been a bit kind of, you come in and it's not really our job to support your actual business. We get partners to do that. And whereas we're thinking of doing a bit more of a hybrid where we have a batch of people come through. And
they would like a managed service. They pay you a fee.
We're thinking of getting that funded, so we're hoping it will be free for them. So we're hoping that it'll probably be funded by philanthropists who kind of want to give back. So that's one of the nice things about our project. It's very community driven, so it opens the door a bit to people who have had their success and wants to give back to more entrepreneurs in the future. We're looking at getting a philanthropically backed kind of that's a big word, but backed scholarship kind of idea called the 10X program that's going to take a bunch of entrepreneurs and then put them through for free and basically just support them a lot more. And so that's something we're actively working on at the moment.
Be a nice new revenue stream in some ways, wouldn't it? I always thought that would be the way that WeWork would have gone. Well, they probably were going to go, right? More, right, okay, we've got you in, you're now the member, now how can we upsell you?
Yeah.
Even with, they made some really interesting tech acquisitions, I don't know, year and a half, 2-3 years ago. And I always thought then they'd be okay, well, you got your basic membership, but now we can do, if you rent a bigger office, then maybe we can do some people counting occupancy service for you, or I don't know, food delivery or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's different incentives really. I think the philanthropists, maybe there's an investment arm in many of these philanthropists also invest in startups. Typically, if you've made that level of wealth where you can be a philanthropist, you're probably investing in companies as well. So there's a little bit of a, you could say selfish in a way, need there that sort of, well, what do I get back? Well, you get early access to deal flow. So, if you look historically at Uppsala, if you were there early enough, you could have caught Nicholas Zenström before he built Skype, or Nicholas Alderberth before he built with Sebastian Klarna, or MySQL, which came from here, or OnGame or Vita, or these billion dollar empires now. So kind of it's a little bit of a pitch there as well, as if you kind of back entrepreneurs, you've kind of got that early access.
Sure.
But mostly it's kind of worst case, you've supported someone in the local ecosystem. And so we hope we can do those kind of models better as a hub, because we are very sort of or public sector funded, and we do a lot that's actually good for the entrepreneur. That's our primary goal, is looking at, is this good for the startups, as opposed to, will this make us more money per square meter? Whereas some hubs are more driven that way because they're more traditional sort of office hotels. So that's an opportunity really, I think, for us.
What would you say, like, even to, just your average office company, right? Like, maybe they're interested in just being more innovative, creating a space that is more, collaborative, right? Is there anything you think, oh yeah, definitely is two things that you can do which can really help?
I mean, coffee machine locations probably primary number one.
It's mad, it really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's so important. It's like we've put a lot of thought into that. I mean, it was very particular about where that was, and also how good the coffee is, frankly. Like, having a machine, like we invested a bit, or at least we had a really great part of coffee centre who partnered with us, so that was awesome. But we were really big on having just awesome coffee, lots of options. We have like hot chocolate, espresso beans. It's pretty decent standard, and it just doesn't fill you with creativity when you sort of go and sit down to do some work and get this horrible filter coffee from this like dust like coffee. It's this, it's those little touches that I think make a big difference. So in social areas, perhaps, like, where do people kind of planning a bit the space, like how do people bump into each other on a daily basis? What are those social kind of interactions looking like? Because that's when ideas form. Essentially, often it is over the coffee machine, or you bump into someone, you get an idea. And so that's a good starting point. It's a kind of physical layout of the space and kind of planning, like, where do things happen. Also, the opposite is true. Like, the room we're sitting in now is, although we're talking right now, but it's like essentially a quiet working room. So you need to have those spaces too, to get work done. So, it's quite typical in San Francisco. You've got these kind of developing dungeons of the coders, and it's all quiet and no one can go there. And all the kind of front-facing marketing is kind of these social open areas. But if you put a programmer in an open space layout for a few days, he's going to want to leave instantly. I mean, so there has to be a balance. So I think that's quite a good starting point.
Great. I think that's really, really interesting stuff, and I hope. No, I know you're going to do really well here, and it's a great space. And thanks. I think it's going to be an interesting few years, I think, for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, James, for having us. And
good
luck to you too as well.
Thanks a lot. See you later. Bye.